Greetings and welcome to Jersey Girl Wisdom on this most perfect day, January 7th, 2021. And today, in a very spontaneous way, I am welcoming to my broadcast, the show today, the Reverend Dr. David Alexander. So, David, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me. And go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I was just on another page trying to share this broadcast out on Facebook a little bit, but it's an honor to be here. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, you're welcome. Dr. David is one of the first people, well, the first person, not one of, the first person I called today after last night's events. Today's show had a particular direction I was going in. And after last night and everything that happened on our Capitol, I decided that I needed a turn. And that's one of the things about being who I am is I can shoot from the hip and rise up when needed. And David, I know we've known each other now for many years, and I knew that this would be a passionate conversation for him. So, just officially, welcome to Jersey Girl Wisdom, our noon show. I'm so glad that those of you who are here with us are here with us. So, David, what the heck?
Yeah, that's WTF. Yeah, for sure. Right. Oh my goodness. I was downstairs yesterday, here where I am now, sitting in my office, writing some curriculum for a class I'm teaching starting at the end of this month, and so kind of scurrying to get that curriculum done. And I had kind of the news on in the background, hearing the electoral college tally happening, and then when the crowd started storming the Capitol, I watched in horror and occupied my attention for a while, and then I was like, I got to get back to work, and I came back downstairs to work, and I just couldn't. I had to go back up, and I had to stop everything yesterday and pray and rant and pray and rant. Yeah, and so you know. Obviously, everyone's talking about a couple of things. One, the extreme disparity between the police reaction or lack of reaction, or preparedness or lack of preparedness to this predominantly white gathering of Trump supporters, or whatever we want to call them. I'm not whatever name they have, versus and compared against their reaction and preparedness to a Black Lives Matter rally, not only at the Capitol, but in many of our cities across the nation
Yeah.
over the summer. It seems to me to be a glaring, obvious takeaway that many people are, and I'm grateful to see. Like you
Yeah.
and I don't need to make that point. Like people are just like, that's right in front of people's faces, and a lot of people are seeing it. Thank goodness. And let's hope there's just some investigation into the lack of preparedness by the police, the federal forces. But we don't have to wait for an investigation. We know what that is. It's simply the bias of consciousness, right? The mere mentioning of a gathering, say, of Black Lives Matter, poses a threat to people, because we have something hidden deep in our consciousness that says Black bodies gathering in ways in which they may express anger or frustration is a threat to all of us. So let's arm up and be prepared. And yet this gathering was known about for a long time by federal forces, et cetera, the FBI, et cetera. And we let white people gather. And this isn't the only one, right? This happened in Michigan when they stormed the Capitol there. And, we just, our subconscious mind simply does not see the gathering of white people protesting, doesn't perceive it as the same threat.
I want to, while you're saying all this, I want to take a mention, and I want to do a shout out here for anyone who might be listening now or at another point. Um, some of the best work that I know of to create the distinctions of that threat is by Resmaa Menaker in his book, My Grandmother's Hands.
Mm.
And he talks about how the white body is threatened from long ago. It's so at a cellular level, so threatened by the black body, and yet wants to be cared for by the black body, and all of the assumptions that humans have made, that we've made for eons of time. And if any of you listening here, if you want to investigate within yourself, because it's got to be within yourself, if you want to take a stand and be part of the solution, you have to learn those distinctions. And in Resmaa Menaker's book, and I'm sorry I didn't ask Reverend Robert to put a banner up for that. Maybe he can do that. My Grandmother's Hands. In that book, he speaks about the white body, the black body, and the blue body, the police body. Mm-hmm. So I really want to encourage anyone who cares, or if you think you're threatened, or if you think we're wrong, even that, pay attention, because it comes down to how unconscious it is. It is absolutely unconscious. So it takes a lot more of investigating to get to it. And so I'm glad that that's the very first point that you brought up tonight, because it was glaring. And I'm grateful that the media began to pick it up, and it wasn't just in our houses where we were saying that.
Yeah, it was everywhere, and so thank goodness for that. And I think the value that people like you and I and this platform can bring to the conversation is to talk about this not from a political ideology difference of us and them, because that's more of the same. I have plenty of critical things to say about the ideology of those that were storming the Capitol. But the value as New Thought teachers that you and I have is to have a conversation at a different level, which is about how consciousness works. So right, wrong, good, bad, or indifferent, there's a consciousness that is unfolding here. And let's talk about those principles of consciousness. And I'm not picking on any ideology or any, but if there is a law of consciousness that is displaying itself predominantly through one ideology, well, so be it, right? But that has nothing to do with it. We're simply talking about trying to understand this from a laws of consciousness perspective, which I think is really important to our healing, right? Because we can't heal it if we don't understand what's happening. And so, that's kind of where I want to go, is like, let's understand consciously, what's really happening. And I think one of the places for that conversation to start is looking at the anger. And this is something you and I teach in our classes, and all of our colleagues do, to looking at the emotion on the outside and then examining what is underneath that. Right? We teach our practitioners to do this. I think our movement, our organizations, our churches, our practitioners, our ministers are actually trained and poised to be the leaders in this conversation, to break through to another level. And yet we avoid it, and we go, I don't want to get political. I don't want to go there. We have all this kind of tender footing around about it in our movement and in our churches. And I don't understand that, because we're so trained with the tools to go.
Well, I think well, I was going to say, not to interrupt you, but I'm clearly interrupting you, because I think that people confuse they confuse the conversation around politics with human rights, and they think they're tied together. Now, one can flow into the other, but the conversation around human rights is really what we're talking about, and the conversation we're trained to have. And this does not mean that anyone listening, it doesn't mean you weren't going to get upset. And because then that's the spiritual bypass. I was horrified when I first heard, and I was afraid. I have to be honest. It tripped a fear button in me that I didn't realize was still there. But I honor that, because and a couple of people I spoke to, we shared this experience that it had that feeling of 9/11. that feeling of being threatened from something so far outside of my reach and my control that I couldn't understand. And then, of course, I brought myself back because that's what I do as a religious scientist, as one practicing the science of mind, as a practitioner. You're right, and I agree with you. Practitioners are perfectly positioned. We and not just licensed practitioners. If you're in this teaching, you have been training your mind and your heart to stay in tough conversations, and that really is that's the invitation here. That is
Yeah,
truly the invitation.
and to get at what is operating, what is the false construct that is operating, because what we can agree on is what we saw is not in alignment with the harmony of God, right? With the vibration of wholeness, however flowery way we want to say that, right? So, and when that's the case in any of our lives, when something is demonstrating itself that is out of alignment, then it is our job, it's our task, it is our faith practice to go within and look at what are the core beliefs that are underneath the emotions that are the signals for what's really happening. And so we've got two axes that we could look at. We could look at I was going to start here with this one in terms of the um, my mind automatically wants to say protesters, but I think now we have to change it and say the domestic terrorists. They gathered to
Yep.
protest, but it turned into something else. Um, and to look at the anger that was there, right? That's what's on the surface. But then to say what's underneath that anger, right?
Yeah.
And what we know in doing our spiritual work and counseling with people is that often what's underneath anger is hurt, right?
Right.
And so the
Right.
healing begins with saying, well, what is the hurt that this large population of people have about their government, about elected officials, about et cetera, et cetera. And so that's one conversation. And then
The
the
one, I want to add one layer. I want to add one layer in there though, because out of if you really watch the protesters testers and you watch some of them, I think that before we could even get to the conversation was hurt, is I believe that they're feeling threatened.
hmm
And then down below, even further, you're right, is the hurt. But that's just for me, that's an interesting layer in there that
yeah.
they're feeling threatened. And that's of great concern to me also.
Yeah, and so maybe that threat is kind of a bridge to the other axes that I think is important to explore, which you talked about that even you experienced as a witness to it, and I experienced it as well, which is the axes of fear and trauma,
Mm.
right? It made me afraid. Um, my wife, her reaction was she grabbed the passports.
Oh,
And this is about this is, to be honest with you, this is about the third time in the last, um, maybe the last year or 2 years. The other was when the president was in front of the church with the Bible and,
mm.
quoting the Insurrection Act, et cetera. She just turned on, she saw it on the news. She turned on her heels. She went to the place in our house where the passports are, gathered them all up and packed a backpack. Right.
Yeah.
And she talked about the need for us to have certified or notarized letters within our backpacks that gave each other permission to travel with our children alone in case we got separated. That's where the level of
Right. Right.
fear
Right.
and trauma went for her because she's lived in countries, for those who don't know, my wife is from Zambia. She's lived in places in the world where she knows the behavior that she's seeing on the TV. This is how dictatorships start. This is how
Yep.
democracy falls. This is how some really bad stuff begins to happen. And you better be able to recognize. And you and I can't recognize it because we grew up in this country, and
Right.
we
Right.
go,
Right.
we go, oh no, it's not going to go that far. Well, meanwhile, she's got her bag packed and cash out of the bank, and she's prepared. So we need to
She had
talk
an
about
exit plan.
yeah. So we need to talk about
Yeah.
fear and trauma. What is that trauma? And I think that there is some common ground there that is important for us to explore because again, the tendency is to divide into a conversation of us and them. And I think if we talk about these common things, anger, hurt, fear, and trauma, and the sense of threat, that while our experiences of each of those things might be a little bit different, um, we might find some common ground, that there's a trauma that the people that were there gathered protesting have felt, and that trauma has turned into them feeling threatened. That threat has turned into them expressing anger, that anger,
Mhm.
so on and so forth. And and so we can all examine that, regardless of where we are on the political spectrum. Where has fear and trauma around, you know, uh, you and I might be the last ones to speak in this conversation, but if we gathered a diverse group of people and talked about how has the government failed you,
Mm.
what trauma exists in you around elected officials not showing up or doing, we probably all have experiences there, but I
Right.
imagine
Right.
people of our light hue would be the last to have that conversation. Others would have more experience there, but I think it's a place where we have some common ground.
I'm really grateful that I am flanked on both sides of my where I live with not just Republicans, because I think that we really have to create a distinction between Trump supporters and Republicans.
Certainly.
That's a very important distinction. But I happen to have a Republican on one side and a Trump supporter on the other.
Mm,
And it's been a spiritual practice for me to be in relationship with this particular neighbor, because I I don't my practice, and part of what we're talking about in the training, is to recognize anything within myself that moves me if I moved unconsciously, and then choose to pull back because I don't want to be moved unconsciously. And so for me, and one of the points I'd like to bring out is that if we are ever going to make a difference, if we are going to be part of the solution, there's not enough legislation or military to make that happen. We can't legislate freedom.
mhm.
We can't legislate diversity inclusion. I mean, we can legislate it and require it, but not the heart of it. And so for me, it is time for us to to continue, not just time. It's not like I'm announcing this and this is new, but this is a call for each of us to continue to go deeper and deeper and deeper, heal and heal and heal, do the work, do the diversity inclusion work, the racial forgiveness work, do the work. Because as individuals, then that's where we begin to impact. We really begin to impact. And it's so, and then you'll hear some people say, well, prayer is not enough. Well, yeah, I beg to differ, because prayer seeps into places where nothing else can go. And so, in the middle of this trauma, like tonight, my community, and if Reverend Robert would put the email address up there for CSL North Jersey, if you want to be part of a gathering tonight, we are gathering. And we are gathering for the point of peace and prayer and contemplation and some music, because I can only bring to the table who I am.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that's what you're saying, that in training of being practitioners and being ministers, we've done a lot of the work. Well, I got news for you. We're not done. How do I know? Look at what's happened.
Right. Well, exactly, exactly. And yeah, prayer is the bedrock of our teaching.
Yeah.
Prayer changes. It changes the self. Prayer changes the one praying the prayer. It doesn't change circumstances externally. It changes the one doing the prayer, and it changes us in I think both mysterious and nuanced ways, as you're saying, right? I love that
Mhm.
line, prayer reaches places, right? How did you say it? Reaches places we
Nothing else
can't,
can go.
yeah,
Yeah, you
nothing else
can't
can go.
interrupt it. It
And,
seeps everywhere.
and places that we can't understand, right? It can
Yeah.
go, it
Hmm.
can kind of cross thresholds that we can't even
Right.
wrap our mind around how to get there. So yes, so all of that. And prayer also moves us, right? We say
Mm.
demonstration is the only authority. Prayer shifts my consciousness, and then I move I act differently in
Right.
the world
Right.
because of that prayer. So yes to all of that. And um, I think somebody said On the chat says, I call them regular Republicans. I love that. Yeah, I have tried to find ways to remain a prophetic voice in my pulpit and in my community, and to do so in a way that still holds an open door and an open space for quote unquote regular Republicans to be part of
Mhm.
my community, to be part of my life, to be that I'm not like cutting off and saying no, you're all wrong. There is a place for in the diaspora of political conversation and diversity for conservative ideology. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a fiscal conservative. There's nothing wrong with being, however else we want to, define those. I'm not any of those things, but there's nothing wrong with that. Um, However, uh, the party has gotten in bed with. Um, with a deranged lunatic. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I
I
mean,
was wondering where you were going to go.
and so I posted something today. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It's a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. If you don't know
Oh,
who
I saw that.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer is, look him up. He was a Lutheran pastor who was a resistor to Hitler in Germany. He had the opportunity, like Paul Tillich, who those who follow me know I quote a lot of Paul Tillich. He had an opportunity to come here to America and to stay, and he was over here for a while. Um, and I won't go into a long story about his biography, but he's a fascinating character. But he went back. He took the last boat back from New York back over to Europe, and then back to Germany before the war started.
Mm.
And he said, "If I'm not there when it's all burning down, um, I can't expect to be there as a leader to rebuild it." And his pacifism led him ultimately to standing against the Nazi regime and actually being a part of an assassination plot against
Mm.
Hitler. So he's a
Okay.
fascinating character to study. And he um, 32 or something when he was caught by the Nazis and put in jail, and then he actually was assassinated by them 2 days after the war ended, and
Wow.
troops just
Okay.
didn't get there in time where he was held. He would have
Right.
been freed. But anyway, fascinating character. But this is what he said. He said, if you board the wrong train,
Mm.
it's of no
Right.
use running along the corridor in the opposite direction. And so what I want to say to my Republican friends, but leaders in particular, not necessarily citizens, friends, neighbors, but Republican leadership, elected leaders, you boarded the wrong train. Okay, let you boarded the stop trying to defend it, stop trying to excuse it,
Yeah.
you boarded
Yep.
the wrong train, going in the wrong direction. That was made abundantly clear yesterday. It was made abundantly clear many, many other times as well, but we're talking about what happened yesterday. It was made abundantly clear. It's time to get off the train
Get off the train.
and board something else.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and if there's any saving grace to the remnant called the Republican Party after this, elected leaders have to make that decision to get off this train. You can't just do what they were doing last night, including the now defeated Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler, and tuck your tail and go in the other direction and say, well, I was prepared to stand against the certification of the votes, but after these events, I'm not going to do that. Well, I'm glad your conscience came into your being when they were threatening your physical safety in your
Right.
place of
Right.
work.
Right.
Um, but that's not enough. That to me is just running on the train in the opposite direction. You got to
Yep.
get off this train, and I don't see any way around this other than, I know there's only 13 days left, but I think this is my personal opinion. I think this man is a clear and present danger to our democracy. I think he has to be removed from office. I think Vice
The worst
President.
part is that I don't trust that anyone will do that, but I
No,
have
I
I
don't either.
completely agree with you. I
think,
completely agree with
Vice
you.
President Pence showed up yesterday, showed that he can stand for the Constitution
Yeah,
and do the right thing. Let him
right,
be president for 12 days, and let's move on, and let's
right.
find ways to have respectful, political, diverse conversations about policy with our Republican neighbors and friends and family. I'm not saying that they're all, wrong. I'm just saying the party has hitched its wagon on the
Yeah,
wrong train, and
yeah.
got to make that clear. What I don't like is New Thought people who try to make nice and say we got to respect everybody's opinion. Not if you've got a knife at my throat. No, no, I don't.
No,
I
no,
think
no.
I
There
got
are
a
times
boundary
there
now.
are times to take a stand.
Yeah.
I want to take 1 minute to do a commercial. I'm so late. I just want to say to anyone listening here, please support New Thought Media Network in keeping them live. And it means that it means you're giving. So please consider giving and offering even a monthly donation to this very worthy radio station. I'm not referring to Rev Jersey Girl, and you might not know this, but behind the scenes, everybody's a volunteer in this organization. And we are busy working to try to keep programs like this, plus the music, but to keep these programs alive so and within reach. So do everything you can if you can, please. Support this radio station, make it part of your monthly giving, make it part of your tithes. And if you're from a New Thought community, really consider this a worthy outlet for some of your offerings. It's so worth it, please. So I wanted to say that because I've wanted to see us have radio stations for years, and I want to be all part of this happening. So I want to go back a little bit to a piece of this. There is a time to take a stand, and maybe this is the Jersey girl in me. Um, nobody likes to hear a minister or somebody like us to say, sometimes you got to fight. Now, when I say fight, though, what I mean is fight for, to stand for. And and the way this became very clear to me in the Pulse nightclub shooting a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And in my community, we have a beautifully diverse community. Oh my God, we have a beautifully diverse community. And it's nice to say, oh, you can't stand against something, you got to stand for something. That's lovely. That's a lovely sound. But I got to be honest with you. You draw a line in the sand, and if you're going to come across and you're going to hurt somebody I love, my stand is going to look way different. And so I am not promoting being angry, and I'm not promoting finding fault or division. I'm not, but I am promoting saying that you're right, David. We have to be able to call things what they are.
Mhm.
And we have to not practice spiritual bypass.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm going to love my neighbors and I'm going to choose to be kind and interact with them because that's who I am. And because if I want the world that I want to live in, that's the only thing I can do. But threatened, I'm going to take a stand. And we have to be able to call things what they are. We do. It's
Abs-
absolutely required.
Absolutely. I like to say love gets to have boundaries, right?
Yes. Yes. That's
And
right.
love needs to have boundaries. We're in a relationship, and I love you, and you love me, but you don't get to abuse me,
Right.
right? You don't
Right.
get to abuse me. And there's a line where you can be upset, you can express your upsetness, we can talk about that, but you don't get to abuse me. And we need to talk about where those boundaries are in our political discourse, in our rhetoric, in our communities, and the way those boundaries show up in what's playing out with our elected officials. I think that's very, very important. And
Well,
then we do return. We set a boundary, and we return to spiritual practice. And
right. Right.
you said before we started you wanted to talk about forgiveness, and I love the practice of forgiveness. But the practice of forgiveness is not um, wishy-washy. It's not. It doesn't have a.
Oh, no, it's fierce. It's a
It's
fierce
fierce.
practice.
It's
Yeah.
fierce, and it has a boundary, right?
Yeah.
If I forgive you, I
The
forgive
thing,
I forgive you because you have demonstrated to me that you don't have the capacity to do what I asked you to do what I expected of you, to do what I needed you to do. You didn't and you could not do that. So I forgive you. But in that forgiveness, I don't then continue to hold you in a place or in a position where you're expected to do the same thing you've already demonstrated that you can't do. That's
Well,
abuse.
okay.
That's abuse, right?
The thing I'd like to remind all my students and my congregation is being spiritual does not mean that you are a doormat. You
Right.
are not a doormat. And boundaries are healthy because if I allow you, and this comes, oh my God, this comes out of the 70s for those of you of that age. If I allow you to abuse me, I've become part of that.
Mhm.
And from the handbook to higher consciousness, and I love to quote this because it rocks people's worlds very often. And Ken Key said, whether you are the offender or the offendee, whether you take offense or give offense, you are the offender or the offendee, which puts me smack in the middle of being responsible, which is a hot topic. It's a hot topic for many. But the art of forgiveness is knowing that I do it for my peace of mind. And that when I do forgiveness thoroughly enough, it means I've also unearthed everything from the subconscious. Matter of fact, I've developed. I'm just going to do a little bit commercial here, David. Give me a minute because these classes have been so powerful. I've created two classes. One, forgiveness courses. One, it's called Forgive to Live Free. That's for lay members, non-practitioners, although practitioners can be in it. And the other one is No Mud, No Lotus. That's for practitioners and ministers
Mm.
because it incorporates prayer, because it goes to the subconscious. It is so complementary to Resma Menika's work because I reiterate and I bring to life the necessity to heal the body where the trauma lives in the body. Because with all this conversation, this raises our awareness. And then when you go home, you got to do the work. Everyone's got to do the work. And in doing the work, you will create boundaries automatically because you'll start to recognize where what that looks like and how it strengthens not only your own inner landscape but your relationship to others, because I then if I don't give you access to me, I've done the right thing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's it. These aren't easy subjects. However, they are good subjects.
Yeah.
And I will continue to believe and teach that if we're going to make a difference, we got to take all of this activity. We've been saying for 4 years the underbelly of this country has been exposed.
Right. Right. And I mean, you touch on so many important things there, and that the way in which healthy boundary setting, uh, examining that, and doing forgiveness work uh, puts us or bumps us up against this awareness of our own responsibility or complicit co-creation in this
Mhm.
situation we find ourselves in. And that is obviously a very uncomfortable place. And yet it's at the heart of what we teach, right? We say that we're co-creators of our reality, and that we don't say that to abuse anyone or to beat anybody over the head over negative circumstances, but in fact to liberate them, right? Because when you understand how the law works, then you can free yourself. But there's no freedom without responsibility, right? There's no freedom without responsibility. You can't get
No,
liberated
no,
without
none. And
being
there's no ability to co-create without it either.
right.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Let-
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Last night I was listening. I downloaded. I love Audible. I have myself a beautiful library of wonderful, wonderful books. And one of the last ones I downloaded, it is Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind home study.
Mm.
And last night specifically, I caught a piece of the book where he talks about, and I love how he says we. He just assumes the we, that this is the way we are in the world. And he talks about how we know that we should not hold on to a grudge, that even holding on to a grudge will diminish and interrupt I mean, he didn't say this is now where I begin to interpret, but I know any place where I'm in judgment, where I'm finding fault, where I'm not forgiving, where I'm holding a grudge, all of those things interrupt my flow and my connection to spirit.
Mhm.
And I'm not walking around as powerful as I can be if instead of being grounded, I'm in those activities. And I loved hearing, I mean, it wasn't his recording of somebody reading his material, but
Right,
I thought,
right.
oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. And somebody said in the comments, this is where the hard work is. Absolutely, this is where the
Yep.
very, very hard work is.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
especially when we talk about the collective level, because what we're talking about is this sort of the reconciling and healing with what we have created
Yeah.
and what we have failed to collectively, what we have failed to recognize, honor, and see uh, because it's uncomfortable. Uh,
Mhm.
people are saying, well, what we saw yesterday, this is not America. Actually, it
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
it has been repeatedly, and that's just a panacea that we give our mind, particularly white folk, to make ourselves feel better, so that we don't have to look at the thing that we've been avoiding. But the very act of avoiding it for so long is what has led to this bubble being burst, this buildup, and this popping of a pimple that we all experienced yesterday.
Right.
And it's not going to get better if we continue to put our head in the sand and say, uh, well, we're better than this, and this is not America. We are in the midst of our own co-creation.
Right.
We are experiencing what we have allowed. You know,
Allowed.
we
That's a
either
good word.
we either create, allow, or promote, right? Those are the three ways we're co-creators with the universe. Doesn't mean you
Mm.
specifically thought the thought that created the
Right.
universe. You might have promoted it, or you might have just allowed it by not being consciously aware. And it's in the general race consciousness, and you just, didn't question it and allowed it to continue to do its thing. And we've created, promoted, and allowed a lot of ugly things in this nation for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And, I said on Sunday, the first Sunday of the year, I said, uh, we all look forward to 2021. I want to go back this Sunday and say, how's that 2021 working out for
How's
you?
that working out?
6 days in. But it proves the principle I was teaching Sunday, which is um, um, good beginnings begin with good endings. Right? You can't have a good beginning. You can't have a good beginning to a new relationship, to a new job, to a new anything, a new year, a new week. It doesn't matter what it is, without a good ending, meaning
Right.
a sense of completeness, wholeness, and reconciliation with where you've come from. And that's what's
What
been missing in our national conversation for a long time. We often we often strive for closure. Oh, I want closure on that relationship. There's no such thing as closure, right? What you want is a completion. You want a sense of, I've learned what I've needed to learn. I'm complete with it. And complete is temporary, right? I just completed lunch upstairs. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be hungry again,
right.
right?
So I want to add to, because I want to jump on this point you've just made. I changed the way I ended the year this year in my messages, in my New Year's Eve meditation, and in the ceremony that I facilitated for my Unity Center that I'm part of. And what I decided was I didn't want to create a framework and a context of of burning what was wrong with 21. I decided to change my focus and invited anyone who would listen to me to change their focus. And instead of letting go and thinking and worrying or concerning ourselves with what was wrong, let's look at how we were empowered. And that's what you're saying. Let's pull the beauty, the gifts, the empowerment, and the increase of self awareness into 2021 instead of saying, okay, that's done. Because you're right, 2020 isn't done if we carry it. What we can carry forward, though, are the gifts and the awarenesses. And for many of you, you grew your resolve. Take note of that. You grew your resolve.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
grew your ability to stand in hard moments. I've had I've had beautiful conversations with people who came to realize how not just white privilege, but the privilege we feel of the freedom of walking out of our house and doing what we want to do, and how much we took things for granted. But if we look back and we say, oh, yes, this is who I am, and then practice that awareness. And folks, if anything we're saying irks you, you got to look inside.
Mhm.
And if there's any hope with what we're saying to you, you got to look inside. And it's always expanding your awareness first. Will you be bothered? Will it hurt if you decide to do some of this anti-racism work? Yep, so be it.
Right.
That's the way it is. You and I, if as what did you call us, fair you'd?
Yeah.
We light skinned individuals,
Yeah.
we get to walk in and out all the time. But
Right.
our people, the people of color that are spiritual brothers and sisters, they don't get a break.
Right.
So if you're a little uncomfortable, so be it. Do
Right.
the work anyway. Have
And,
the conversation
and
anyway.
know that your liberation is at hand. That's what it's about. It's about getting free. And
Yeah.
I sometimes talk about, what we see happening in really stark terms that kind of, sometimes upset people, particularly light-skinned folks. And I use that distinction. I often pause to specifically say light-skinned or light-hued folks because I often talk about these things as manifestations of what I call the disease of whiteness or the lie of whiteness. And I've had in the last couple of days some people, white folks, email me or text me, and they're upset and they're saying, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't think you should be, calling whiteness a disease. And they're personally offended by it. And fortunately, they've been open enough with me to speak to me, and they've been receptive enough to hear my response. And my response is always this: you're not white. I'm not white. White is a false construct. It's a false mental construct that was created in order to leverage power and privilege over non-white folks. So when we identify with white, we are identifying with a lie. It's not the truth of who you are. You are, I don't know what you are, but you're Scottish, you're German, you're Irish, you're Polish, you're European, but you're not white. White
Right.
is a false
Right.
construct that was created to leverage power and privilege over people of color. And the disease of whiteness has run amok in this country. And the thing that whiteness hates the most as a construct, and I'm not picking on anybody or any political
Got it?
ideology, I'm talking about how consciousness works. Whiteness hates accountability. It hates accountability. And that's what
Yeah.
we're seeing play out. Don't hold me accountable. Whiteness gets to set the rules and punish everybody else for not following them, but never holds itself accountable at the same level. We see that
And
happen
some of
just
the
all of
some
the
of the some of the roots that have come, some of the roots that are at the understanding, the our European roots and the roots of where this came from. If you do your history and you look back and you understand that at some point you stopped understanding what humans were running away from, and we just replicated the behavior, and then we kept it alive because we become attached to our identity. I want to put out another. I want
because that's
to.
how consciousness works, right? If you don't
Yeah,
keep it,
yeah,
where you came from,
yeah.
then you repeat it. So again, we're talking about how consciousness works with this, the laws of consciousness is what we're dealing
And
with.
that's why we got to wake up, and that's why you have to. I had Tracy Brown on my show a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was a week ago, and the spiritual practice that's going to help every single listener here is the practice of curiosity. Remain curious about all things. Remain curious about all people. Remain curious about yourself. Remain curious about why you feel what you feel. That, and because when you're curious, you can't be judgmental. And I want to put out one more, David. I don't know if you've seen it or if you read the book Between the World and Me by
Mm.
uh,
Taylor.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. I never say his name correctly. I don't think Ta-Nehisi Coates, right?
Oh, mhm.
And I bought the book, but I didn't get to read it yet. But if you are listening and you have HBO Max, I don't know if it's anywhere else. They made a brilliant movie, not a cinematic type of thing, a reading of his book
Mm.
brilliantly. Please take time to watch it. The physical, the impact that it leaves, it invites you to feel into all the subjects that we're talking about. And we as a society can't get to the other side of this unless we're willing to do it by feeling into it. So
Mhm.
please take the time to read these books, to watch these movies, get involved in a book study. I know my center, we're about to start our second round of one, and we call it Healing the Divide. And we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes and training facilitators and just to stay in the conversation, to stay in the conversation.
Yeah.
So
There, there's a practice from classic Suzuki, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, classic book on consciousness that I'm incorporating into a class that I'm teaching. So if I can do a quick plug, um, I'll be teaching starting the end of this month a class called You Belong, based on the book of the same title, and that's our theme at SLCA this year. So talking about belongingness, and you can find everything there on our website. Um, but there's a practice in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that's about bowing, bowing to everything. And when we, in order to bow, right, to the uncomfortable feeling, to the political adversary, to the whatever that is making you uncomfortable, or you see on TV, to bow to it as a spiritual practice. It's not going to be your first response, right? My first response yesterday was not to bow to what I was seeing going on, right? But eventually I got to this place, and because it holds that critical thing of curiosity and respect, right? To bow to it, first I have to belong in my own body, right? I have to feel safe and secure and a sense of belonging, that I am me, and this thing over here is that, and let me bow to it. Let me, in respect and reference, what is it here to teach me, us? Let me be curious. It requires curiosity. There's
mm,
wisdom in whatever is in front of me, even though I don't like it. It angers me. It upsets me. It whatever. Let me be curious about all the. So the practice of bowing embodies all of
mm.
that wisdom of what you were just speaking of, curiosity. So, yeah.
I can remember 20 years ago when I first got involved in New Thought and in the organization. And there was some individuals that I was involved with that a namaste bow or a bow was common.
Mhm.
And I watched on my periphery how frowned upon it was because I think in the United States, especially, it's almost seen as subjugation in a negative way when truly it is the art of surrender.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying to me is about surrendering. And
Right.
when I can surrender my opinions, oh, I get a little emotional. When I'm willing to surrender my opinions and be present with and be in right relationship, then I don't need my Republican neighbors to be anything but what they are. And I don't need anybody else to be what they are. I'll move in right relationship. And that's a beautifully shamanic practice too, is to be in right relationship. Yes, we will disagree. And let's be in relationship anyway.
Right. And it puts us back in our body. We can get so
Yeah.
heady about this teaching that it puts us back in our body, which I think is so, so important.
Absolutely. So I am so grateful. I am so grateful. I have loved our time together, not just today, but over the years, and I appreciate your presence in the world and the work that you're doing. And I know anybody who watches this now or who has watched it or will watch it later on has will really benefit. Um, Again, you are on the New Thought Media Network station. Please give to this station. I will be back here next week. We're going to continue the conversation next week about forgiveness and how it ties in. So return next week if you will, and we'll do part B. And David, I adore you. Wait, and I want to leave the folks with one funny fact. Remind me, what was the name you were thinking about naming William?
We were sharing before the show started. It was 4 years ago. We were on a boat in San Diego, and that's when I told her and the other council members when I received news that I was going to be a father. Um, the name, actually, I want
Do you, I can't
one of
remember it right now.
one of the names was Herkimer.
Oh,
It's an old joke in our family. It's like, pulling out names that, were popular, 200 years ago. And like, why aren't those names around anymore?
right, for good reason.
And instead we picked one, William, which has been around
Yeah,
for like 500 years,
yeah.
6,500 years, and is still popular. So that's
Which I
great.
have a warm place in my heart for, since I have a 5-year-old William in my life.
Yeah.
David, I thank you. I bless every one of you who have been here today. Do the good work.
Yeah.
Stand for truth. Take care of your heart. Take care of your body. Uh, let us move forward as a community and being part of the solution by standing in unity and oneness, but doing it wisely, and with great awareness. Bless you all. Thank you for your time today. I know we had almost an hour show where normally it's a half hour, but things were flowing. Oh no, things were flowing, and it's all good. I bless you. I love you, and I bow to you. I thank you. Thank you, David.